Welcome to London, Tanya. Could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do for British Council?
I'm Tatiana Ilyina. I'm the head of arts in the British Council in Russia. And among other things, I'm responsible for programming our work in literature.
Could you tell us a little bit about some of the literature work that you've been doing recently?
We've been doing literature work for years, and it's one of the most active areas of our work in Russia. And recently, I think the most interesting example of our work is UK-Russia Year of Language and Literature, which was in 2016. And it was a year-long program which allowed us to introduce to Russia about 40 new UK authors. So that was really exciting.
I think the Year of Language and Literature involved a number of different types of projects.
Yes.
Could you talk in a bit more detail about maybe a couple of the projects and sort of why you chose them and how they fitted in with our work generally in Russia?
Yes, for us, working in Russia, and given that it's a big country, for us it's very important that we work large scale and long term. So we try on the one hand to do projects which reach wider audience. On the other hand, we want to create opportunities for more professional and in-depth connections between professionals in Russia and in the UK. So when we programmed our Year of Language and Literature, we tried to come up with ideas for projects that would be really big, and on the other hand, smaller scale, but which allowed a more in-depth collaboration. So one of the examples that I could give is a big non-fiction book fair. It's a Russian annual book fair with which we partnered to enable us to introduce new writing to Russian readers. So given that the book fair is really big, it gives us access to really many people in 4 or 5 days. And we delivered various sessions with authors at the book fair, as well as we took a number of writers to the universities where they could meet with students. We did creative writing workshops. We did some work with kids around book design and creating your own book. We did a lot of media work around that, and it gave us an opportunity to expose new writing from the UK to millions of people in Russia. Another example of a project where we helped to develop more professional connections was our exchange with Scottish Poetry Library, where we had 3 Scottish poets coming over to Russia, to Moscow and St. Petersburg, where they worked with Russian poets and wrote sonnets in response to Shakespeare, because last year we also celebrated 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's death. And it was a really interesting, smaller scale, but very deep engagement project, because it allowed poets to work for 3 days with each other very closely. And as a continuation, Russian poets are going back to Scotland later this month to share their experience, to reflect on what they did recently, and to continue their partnership. And hopefully we're going to publish a pamphlet with their works, and there will be legacy after this project. And we very much hope that poets continue working together once our program is over. So this is how we contribute to establishing relationships and ensuring that there is some continuity after we finish the program.
We, at British Council, we do work in quite a lot of places that people would regard as difficult countries to work in, and Russia is one of them. Could you talk a little bit about what the advantages are and rewards for British literature organisations and authors to be working somewhere like Russia, and how we support them in doing that?
Well, Russia is a very interesting country, and it is very safe, no matter what people say and think. And we do take very good care of everybody whom we invite. And before organising a visit, we do a lot of research about authors that we want to invite, or literature organizations that we want to work, and try to create opportunities that would be most interesting for them. So professionally, it's a very rewarding place to work in Russia. And from the organizational point of view, we do provide a lot of support and advice on how to better prepare for your visits. If you start well in advance and do some research on your side as well and come prepared, that will help you make the most of your visit. So I think that it's mutual work on both sides that is required, but I just want to encourage everybody to come and have some experience, because for some people it has been a really life-changing experience. And again, saying from my long-term work with the British Council, I have seen a lot of relationships developing of visits to Russia, which in the first place were not so obvious for authors. What we also do is, when preparing for the visit, we try to find out from organizations or writers what they are particularly interested in, so that we could come up with ideas how they can enrich their experience. We put them in touch with Russian authors or publishers or literary organizations, translators, so that they talk to people in their professional community and find ways, if they're interested, to work together in the future. What we also do is we try to provide opportunities for institutions in Russia and in the UK to partner with each other. And we have quite a lot of examples of really good relationships which we contributed to developing in the past.
So finally, what do you find most rewarding about your job?
Most rewarding? Well, I think that working in arts and culture is rewarding as such, because arts and culture, it's what helps build relationships between people, between countries, and culture creates opportunities which may not be available at other levels. And continuing cultural dialogue, cultural conversation in the contemporary world is very important. And I think literature works very well because both Britain and Russia has strong literary tradition, and people in both countries admire literature. That is why I think that it is a really fruitful ground for developing conversation, for starting conversation and for developing conversation about culture, about relationships, and I think that talking to each other, talking about culture, talking about literature, and talking to each other is a way forward, and I think that literature provides a really good platform for that.